Good evening, this is Shannon Ames with History for All. Our top story this evening is again the Boston Massacre, a tragic event in our young colonies. We have additional coverage and breaking news, but first, we go to Shelby Jones.
Thank you, Shannon. Again, as Shannon said, we are covering the Boston Massacre. I have with me Captain Preston. Thomas Preston was an officer of the 29th Regiment of Foot and has been tried with murder. Captain Preston, can you tell us what happened last Monday, Captain Preston?
On Monday night, at 8 o'clock, 2 soldiers were attacked and beat. 9 some of the guard were summoned to deal with the situation and rang an alarm, for which the purpose was that and not for a fire, to summon the people of the far country. Thusly, on my way there I saw people in great commotion, and heard them use the most cruel and horrid threats against the troops. They immediately surrounded the sentry posted there, and with clubs and other weapons, threatened to execute their vengeance upon him. I was soon informed by a townsman that their purpose was to take and murder this soldier. They, the soldiers, soon rushed for the people by charging their bayonets in half circles, kept them at a little distance. The mob still increased and more outrageous, striking their clubs or bludgeons one against another, and calling out, "Come on, you rascals, you bloody backs, you lobster scoundrels, fire if you dare. Fire and be damned. We know you dare not," and much more such language was used. At this time I was between the soldiers and mobs, parleying with and endeavoring with in all my power to keep things at peaceable relations.
Then what happened?
They advanced to the points of the bayonets, struck some of them, and even with some muzzles of the pieces they seemed to endeavour to close, in which well-behaved persons asked me if the guns were charged. I replied yes. They asked me if I intended to give the orders to fire. I answered no, by no means. At this very moment, one of the soldiers, who feeling very threatened, proceeded to fire and discharge his gun into the crowd. Following this, a general panic occurred, with more soldiers beginning the fire. The mob, becoming very frightened, proceeded to retreat.
Thank you, Captain Preston. Must have been a very stressful event for you. Now we go back to Shannon for your next story of the night.
Thank you, Shelby. And now continuing with our top story, we have Sam Hafley.
Thank you, Shannon. And here with me I have Andrew, a house servant of a very prominent Boston citizen. Andrew, could you please tell me what you saw?
Well, there were a number of people around me, and we're picking up pieces of sequoia that had been thrown out thereabout in snowballs and throwing them over at the Centennial. I went to cross over to where the soldiers were, and as soon as I got a glimpse of them, I heard somebody huzzah and say, "Here's old Murray with the riot act," and they began to pelt snowballs. The first word I heard was a grenadier say to a man by me, "Damn you, stand back!"
And how near was he to him?
He was so near that the grenadier might have run him through if he had stepped one step forward. While I stopped to look at him, a person came to get through. He turned about and said, "You damned lobster, bloody back, are you going to stab me?" The soldier said, "By God, will I!" One of the persons who was talking with the officer turned about quick to the people and said, "Damn him, he's going to fire!" Upon that, they cried out, "Fire and be damned! Who cares? Damn you, you dare not fire!" and began to throw snowballs and other things.
And did they hit any of them?
Yes, I saw 2 or 3 of them hit. One struck a soldier on the hat, and the people were right here. One of these people, a stout man with a long cord stick, threw himself in and made a blow at the officer with his club and knocked his gun away and struck him over the head. The blow came either on the soldier's cheek or hat. The stout man held the bayonet with his left hand and twitched it and cried, "Kill the dogs, knock them over!" I heard the word "fire." I thought I heard the report of a gun upon hearing the report. I saw the same grenadier swing his gun and immediately he discharged it.
And did the soldiers of that party, or any of them, step out or move out of the rank in which they stood to push the people?
No, and if they had, they might have killed me, and many others with their bayonets.
And did you, as you passed through the people towards the Royal Exchange Lane and the party, see a number of people take up any and everything they could find in the street and throw them at all the soldiers?
Yes, I saw about 10 or 15.
And did you yourself?
Yes, I did.
And after the gun fired, where did you go?
I ran as fast as I could into the first door I saw open. I was very much frightened.
Well, that sounds very horrible. Thank you for your time. And back to Shannon.
Thank you, Sam. And now we have more breaking news with Shelby.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm Shelby Jones here with more breaking news live from the Boston Massacre. I'm here with William Wyatt, a Bostonian who had his boat harbored at the docks in Boston. Mr. Wyatt, can you please tell us what happened at the docks?
I was in Boston, down at Treats Wharf, where my vessel was lying, and hearing the bells ring, supposed that there was a fire in the town, whereupon I hastened up to the townhouse on the south side of it, where I saw an officer of the army, lead out of the guardhouse their 7 or 8 soldiers of the army, and lead them down in seeming haste to the custom house on the north side of King Street, where I followed them. And when the officer had got there with the men, he bid them face about. The said officer ordered his men to lead, which they did accordingly, with the utmost dispatch. Then they remained about 6 minutes with their firelocks rested and bayonets fixed, but not in exact order.
And then what did you see?
I observed a considerable number of young lads, and here and there a man amongst them, about the middle of the street facing the soldiers. I observed some of them had sticks in their hands, laughing, shouting, huzzahing, and crying fire, but could not observe that any of them had thrown anything at the soldiers, or threatened any of them. Then the said officer retired from before the soldiers, and firing he stamped and said, "Fire be the consequence what it will." Then the second man on the left wing fired off his gun. Then after a very short pause, they fired, one after another, as quick as possible. Beginning on the right wing, the last man's gun on the left wing flashed in the pan, then he primed again. And the people being withdrawn from before the soldiers, most of them further down the street, he turned his gun toward them and fired upon them.
And what happened after that?
Immediately after the principal firing, the said officer, who had commanded the soldiers above to fire, sprang before them, waving his sword or stick, saying, "You rascals, what did you fire for?" and struck up the gun of one of the soldiers who was loading again. Whereupon they seemed confounded and fired no more. And I remember the said officer was going down with the soldiers towards the custom house. A gentleman spoke to him and said, "Captain Preston, for God's sake, keep your men in order, and mind what you are about." And further I say not.
Thank you, Mr. Wyatt. That's all for this story. I send you back to Shannon.
Thank you, Shelby. And now we go back to Sam Hackley.
Thank you, Shannon. And here with more breaking news, I have George Sanderlin, a colonial dock worker who is another eyewitness of the Boston Massacre. Could you please tell me what happened?
On hearing the noise of the fight, Samuel Atwood came up to see what was the matter, and entering the alley, he heard the latter part of combat. And when 2 boys who had been fighting had dispersed, he met the 10 or 12 soldiers who had been fighting with them, rushing down the alley towards the square, and asked them if they intended to murder people. They answered, "Yes, we do," and struck the wounded Atwood.
And what happened after they attacked Atwood?
Immediately after, those heroes, the British officers, appeared in the square asking where were the cowards. One of them advanced towards the youth who had a stave in his hand, but the young man, seeing the person near him with a drawn sword, held up his stave in defiance. And then they quietly passed by, up the little alley to King Street, where they attacked a single unarmed persons until they raised much clamor.
And how many people total were there in the square?
There were about 30 or 40 persons, mostly lads, being by this means gathered in King Street. Captain Preston, with a party of men who charged bayonets, came up from the main guard to the commissioner's house, the soldiers pushing their bayonets, crying, "Make way." They took place by the costume house, and continuing to push and to drive people off, pricked some in several places, on which were clamorous, and it is said they threw snowballs.
Snowballs. And how did the captain react to this?
On this, the captain commanded then to fire, and more snowballs came. He again said, "Fire be the consequences what it will." One soldier then fired, and the townsman with a cudgel struck him over the hands with such force that he dropped his firelock. And rushing forward, he aimed a blow at the captain's head, which grazed his hat and fell pretty heavy on his arm. However, the soldiers continued to fire successively until 7 or 8, or as some say, 11 guns were discharged. By this fatal maneuver, 3 men laid dead, and 2 more were struggling for life.
Well, I'm very sorry you had to witness that. Thank you for your time. And back to Shannon.
Thank you, Sam. We will continue to keep you updated on any new events. I'm Shannon Ames with WCHS Eyewitness to History. Good night, and stay classy, Boston.